All right, y'all, are we good? We ready to roll? Heck yeah, let's go. All right, I'm gonna, so this is the last one of these. And Bishop Justin will be here next Sunday. It's one service, 9:30. Don't forget that. So 9:30 service. Bishop will be here. I've given you some theology. I've given you a little bit of liturgy. I've given you the structure kind of the Anglican Church. And now we're rounding it out on the history because this is a part of who we are, understanding, how we came to be and the process and all of that. So you'll be able to see a little bit about, in this last class, a little bit about what was valued very early on in Anglicanism and what they were pushing against. So it should be a lot of fun. The English Reformation, I really don't think there's anything more exciting to talk about than the English Reformation. Like, what takes place in the English Reformation is so ridiculous that it is just absolutely pure entertainment, especially when you realize that it's real, that it happened, and that it's our history. So that's what we're going to be looking at. So we've made it all the way up to Henry's last wife, and so we're gonna move from Henry's last wife. I've got a finger issue and my Band-Aid's not cooperating. All right, so I'm gonna open in prayer. So please join me in prayer. Lord, we come before you. We give you the time, the space. We ask that you would speak into our hearts as well as our minds, that you would be informing us of who you are and how you have worked throughout history. And we thank you for that in your name. Amen. All right, so last wife is Catherine Parr, and this is the slide that we left off on last week. And what I shared with you last week is she's the lucky one. And she's the lucky one because she outlives Henry VIII. And if you remember the history of Henry VIII, lots of heads were rolling. He is not a pleasant individual. And so if you cross him, basically you're going to get your head cut off. And so I don't even know how you find a sixth wife after you've got that sort of history. But I guess being king gets you there. So his last wife is, she is a strong reformer. And Henry VIII is going to do something that is kind of strange. And that's that he is going to allow her to raise Edward and to basically be the one that pours everything into his heir to the throne, Edward. And meaning that Edward is going to be on a pretty strict diet of Reformation theology, liturgy, and thought. And you know that Henry didn't want any doctrinal changes because he loved the Roman Church. Even though he broke away from it, he always loved the Roman Church. So his heir to the throne is being raised almost exclusively by Catherine, and she is basically raising up a young Protestant. So her influence will be substantial on Edward. The third thing that Henry VIII does that's kind of strange is when he dies, Edward is only 9 years old. So you got a 9-year-old king. I had a 9-year-old not too long ago, about 2 years ago. I can't imagine him being king of anything. But one of the things, that we know when people are 9 years old, they're very impressionable. They're still forming who they are, obviously. And so we've got a 9-year-old king being raised by a very Protestant mother. But then Henry VIII makes arrangements for his son to be brought along slowly. So this is, this is wisdom. Looking at your 9-year-old son, you're thinking, well, I need a group to kind of build up a king at some point. And so, but what Henry does is he surrounds his son with all of the notable reformers in England. All of the people who have been dying for theological reformation in England, not just political reformation, are now raising up Edward. So you got a 9-year-old son with a reformed mother, as well as all of these mentors are Reformation people. What do you think that that's going to do to Edward?
Make him a reformer.
Pretty easily. Like, he is going to be very much inclined to bring about Reformation in England. So when Henry dies and young Edward's already strong reformer, Cranmer is now free to do what he's wanted to do. Remember, the only things that they were able to change under Henry VIII, do you remember the two things?
Rome.
Well, they did that. But after they did that, they made two theological or practical changes in England that Henry VIII approved.
Liturgy in English, was that one of them? No, they were still in Latin.
Had to do with
Was Tyndale bringing the Bible in?
They got the Bible. They got one Bible per church, and they got 6 in the cathedral. Okay? So they were able to get Tyndale's Bible. Remember Tyndale's prayer? Open the eyes of King Henry VIII. And 2 years later, the guy that he burned at the stake for smuggling in Bibles into England, he is now bringing that very translation, Henry VIII is, into the churches in England. So that's the first thing. Second thing was they tore down the monasteries. Remember, the monasteries were horrible, gross places. They were not wonderful places of prayer. If they would have been, we would have left the monasteries as they should have been left. But because they were what they were, they tore down the monasteries. Those were the only 2 changes they were allowed. Once Henry dies, and Edward, now pretty strong in his reforming tendencies, now you're going to see all sorts of changes take place. And I'm going to walk you through the big ones that start happening pretty quickly. So, what's that?
When you say tore down, did they physically destroy the buildings or just wipe out the people in the processes?
I think they physically tore down the
Physically
buildings.
tore down.
Because what Henry VIII wanted was the money. Now, the reason that he was inclined to do that was for the financial gain of it. The reason the reformers wanted to do it was for the purity of Christianity. So the first thing, well, these are all like the first things. So like one of the first things that Edward does is now clergy can marry. So Thomas Cranmer's wife can come out of the box. He no longer has to travel with her in a box. Congratulations, Thomas. So clergy can marry. It's one of the first things that takes place. Another thing that takes place is that the laity receive communion in both kinds. Now you receive the bread and the wine. The wine is not just for the clergy. You receive both, which we still do today. Another thing that takes place is the doctrine of purgatory is rejected, and all of the strings attached to purgatory, so all the other doctrines that are attached to it, are also rejected, which is, the treasury of merit, as well as penance, from penance in the sense of drawing from the treasury of merit to apply it to yourself. All this stuff is completely rejected. Purgatory is gone. Prayer.
Catholics still hold the purgatory value that they held at that time?
Yep. It might even be stronger. In many senses, they've really, because what you have is from the Reformation, Rome is going to realize that we made mistakes. And then you have what is referred to as the Counter-Reformation years from then. But there are certain things that even in the Counter-Reformation, they refused to clean up. And a lot of these things they doubled down on, like clergy not being allowed to be married, and things like purgatory, the treasury of merit, and all of that sort of thing. So prayers to the saints, another thing they doubled down on. Thomas Cranmer removed prayers from the saints. You see this creeping back into the Episcopal Church where people do pray to the saints. I don't think you're going to go to hell if you're praying to the saints or anything like that. But my question to you is, why would you do it? Why wouldn't you go right to Jesus? If I can pray to St. Augustine or Jesus, and I love St. Augustine, I am always going to bypass St. Augustine and just pray right to Jesus. So I've never understood praying to the saints just as a practical, that's like me wanting to see, like, I don't know, a congressman when the president's sitting right there. Why would I go to you if I could go to you? And so praying to the saints is rejected, but the point is that praying to the saints was rejected. Like, you were not to pray to the saints. Now, in the Anglican Episcopal Church, you can pray to the saints or you cannot pray to the saints. It's kind of optional, as a result of the Oxford movement, where you brought a lot of these Roman Catholic practices back into the church in about the 18th century. So praying to the saints is rejected. Relics are burned. That's a great thing. You might think, well, the preservation of relics, that's wonderful. But why would it be a good thing that they burned the relics? Why did they burn them? Why didn't they just no longer do the practice they were doing? Why burn the relics?
People were worshiping them?
Yes! People were worshiping them. Not only were people worshiping them, the church was charging you to come and worship them. So people were giving their money to look at these bones, and they would tell you, hey, check this out. This is the bone, this is the finger bone of St. Augustine, which may or may not have been the finger bone of St. Augustine. Like, you have no idea. You could dig up a squirrel and find some rib and call it the finger bone of St. Augustine. It was just absolutely ridiculous. And if you chart where all, because a lot of these they still have today, you can find places that claim to have the same bone of the same saint in two different locations. Somebody's off. It's a miracle. That's awesome. So the relics were burned as a way of doing away with this horrible practice of charging people, to worship physical. I mean, what's the difference between worshiping St. Augustine's finger bone and creating an idol and worshiping that? It's the same thing. So got rid of the relics. Wonderful. Altars were removed and replaced with tables. What do we have at Holy Apostles? We have a table. Why do you know that we have a table?
Because you say it all the time.
Yes.
And you're a Reformed guy.
Yes. You know that we have a table because what Jim said is, when I do the Eucharist, I'm looking at you. Meaning that when you have an altar, it is against the wall. So I would be doing the service with my back to you because I am at the altar. Tables, you can walk around. Altars, you cannot walk around. And we have a table. The other reason that we have a table, or the other reason that I think that we should call it the table, is because what we do at that table is prepare a meal, and that's what you do at tables. What do you do on altars? Sacrifices. What are we trying to get away from in the Reformation? The idea that we are re-sacrificing Christ on that table every time we have the Lord's Supper. Why are we trying to get away from that? Because Scripture tells us that Christ was sacrificed once and for all humanity. He doesn't need to be re-sacrificed over and over and over again. Ted.
Was there a shift in the Episcopal Church? Because in the parish that I grew up, there was an altar. And it was clearly against the wall, and the priest faced the wall, and he was a terrific showman, but it was definitely an altar.
Yeah, there's a shift. It's 18th century. It's the Oxford movement. What do you have? You have a bunch of seminarians from Oxford, or going through Oxford, and they come out, and they're very influential. It's Pusey, John Henry Newman, all these like high churchmen. And what they're doing is they're saying, when we went through the Reformation, we support the Reformation in all the things that it got rid of, but you threw the baby out with the bathwater and you threw out too many practices that are of value, and we're going to bring them back. And so one of the things that they brought back was altars. And so it's funny because what you'll see these cultural moves in the Episcopal Church where everybody's taking out their altars and they're replacing them with tables. And then 20 years later, everybody's getting rid of their tables and they're bringing, it's kind of like the thing with wallpaper. Like everybody's tearing down their wallpaper. Wallpaper's horrible. And then 20 years later, it's like wallpaper's amazing. And everybody's putting wallpaper up. It's one of the reasons I haven't gotten rid of my popcorn ceilings, because I'm just waiting because it's coming back. And all you suckers that paid thousands and thousands of dollars, you're going to be spraying popcorn up there. And I'm going to be sitting there like, yeah, baby. I knew I was always cool. Altars are removed and replaced with tables. The Book of Common Prayer, written in English and given to the people. And a lot of the Reformation is saying, we are going to give you access. We're going to give you the stuff instead of holding it and saying, if you want to know, come talk to us. Because what's the danger in that? What's that? Interpretation. Certainly interpretation, but even more dangerous than interpretation. Power. If I'm the only one who knows what's right, and you all, I know, isn't that scary? And you all are completely dependent upon finding out what's right by coming to me. And don't worry, I'll tell you, and I'll be completely unbiased. It won't benefit me in any regard. I mean, tremendous power was being used by the church. And so giving them prayer books, giving them the Bibles, this is all massive stuff that's being done. Skeleton sermons were written. These were sermons that Thomas Cranmer and a couple other reformers wrote, and they gave it to the clergy, and they said, preach these. Stop preaching your own sermons. Now, you may think, well, that sounds horrible. Why do you think he did that? No.
Consistency. Give him
Heresy.
power when he did that.
Yeah, that they had horrible sermons. Like this, the Episcopal Church hadn't changed a whole lot, and so, but the sermons that they were preaching in England were just dreadful. And so, part of redeeming. Part of the Reformation is let's get good preaching back in the church. And so Thomas Cranmer, for a time, wrote the sermons and said, preach these. And then when you learn these, when you understand, then you can be free to preach your own sermons. But until you prove that you're free to preach your own sermons, you preach these. So preach your own sermons. or preach these skeleton sermons. Vestments, certain vestments were banned, including the chasuble and the stole. And the reason they were banned is because they're considered sacerdotal garments, meaning that they were garments that the clergy would put on that would enable them to turn the bread and the wine into the body and the blood. And it's still practiced today, so you will still see clergy that lay their chasuble on the altar railing, and when they go up behind the table, then they'll put their chasuble on. And what that clues you in on is, I am putting this on and I am about to make the magic happen. Now, yes. Yeah, most clergy do. Now, most clergy don't believe that that's what they're doing. But historically, that's what you're doing. Because that is coming from the Roman Catholic tradition, and that's what they were doing. And if we're using that, then what we're communicating is the same thing. Now, you can teach that, and so you can do these things as long as you teach the people, that's not what I'm communicating to you. But most clergy don't teach their people. So they just go through these practices, and what it's communicating is that garment that he just put on there must be of some importance for what he's doing behind that table. And so what it does is it creates superstition. Now, as you can see, most clergy wear chasubles and stoles. I even wear stoles. Why do I wear a stole? Any ideas?
Because I want you to.
Yeah, it's just not worth the fight. But the chasuble was, and so I don't wear a chasuble. I do have a tippet, which is what they did wear. It's just black. And I wear that on Reformation Sunday. I wear the tippet. But these vestments were banned. They were not just like optional. They were banned. You were not allowed to wear them. Transubstantiation is completely rejected. We do not believe that the bread and the wine turn into the body and blood of Jesus Christ. That is removed. We believe that when you receive the Lord's Supper, you are spiritually receiving Jesus Christ, and there's a real thing that takes place there. But it is not the blood of Jesus Christ or the body of Jesus Christ in any physical sense. And then the last thing we already talked about, the sacrifice of the Mass is rejected. We are not re-sacrificing Christ over and over again every Sunday. And so, how does that play out for the Roman Catholic Church? Is if you go, I don't know if you've ever noticed, but Roman Catholics love doing services. So anything that takes place in the world, the immediate idea of the Roman Catholics is we should have a service. And so if something bad happens, we should have a service. If something good happens, we should have a service. If it's Tuesday and the fifth Tuesday, we should have a service. What? They should have a mass. Yes, a mass. Sorry. Yeah, exactly. We should have a mass. Now, why do they do that? Because it's completely appropriate for them to do that, given their theology. It's not appropriate for us to do that, given our lack of theology in this regard. But they do it because every time they celebrate the Eucharist, Christ is being re-sacrificed and more grace is going out into the world. So if that's what you believe, then you should have a lot of services. But if you don't believe that you're re-sacrificing Christ and grace is going out and more grace is going out into the world, well then probably the solution to every problem is not let's have a service. But it makes sense for them. All right, so something no one else did. Here's something that Thomas Cranmer did that nobody else did during the Reformation, is that when the Reformation kicks off in England, Thomas Cranmer is going to put together an amazing all-star team of reformers. And you didn't see this in Germany, you didn't see this in Zurich, you didn't see this in Geneva. You saw one main reformer and then much smaller individuals. But in England, what you see is a bunch of big name reformers all in the same place, moving in the same direction. So from England, he has himself, of course, but Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley, which we're going to hear a lot more about, and John Hooper are really big names, really big reformers. But he's actually going to pull from outside of England. And he's going to bring in two reformers that were very successful in bringing Reformation from where they were, and so he brings them into England, and he does something really strategic with it, and I love when people do this. First of all, he brings Martin Bucer, who was a reformer, and he brought him into England, and then he placed him at the University of Cambridge. And then he brought in Peter Martyr, and he placed Peter Martyr at the University of Oxford. What is Cambridge and what is Oxford to England? Yeah, but
It's their best universities.
it's the best of the best. It is everybody who is going through seminary that is going to be a priest in the future is most likely going to go through these two seminaries. So what they're doing is they are training up reformers right in seminary, right out of the gate, with two of the best reformers that were out there. So he's got these four, plus he's got these two, and he's using the universities to raise up reformers. It's pretty impressive. When the church uses any strategy to do ministry, because most of the time it feels like potluck, like oh, okay, well we'll do this, but it doesn't feel like they're like really planning what they're going to do. Like, I love when bishops try to figure out what churches are about to take off and place certain clergy there based on their gifts and abilities. Not necessarily place them there, but see if it works. See if the congregation likes them. See if they like the congregation. Because there should be some sort of strategy in this whole thing. I like when dioceses look out at communities and say, that community is exploding, we need to put a church there. But it oftentimes doesn't feel like it works that way. But there's a lot of strategy taking place here, and I love it. So all is going well. All this change has taken place. Everything the reformers wanted is happening. They've got great reformers leading the charge, and everything's going well until the absolute unthinkable happens. And what would that be? How in the world you got a 9 to 15-year-old king and he dies? You got Edward, who dies at 15 from tuberculosis in 1553. So these 6 years of Reformation taking place in England, and then Edward dies, which is going to be a pretty big problem. And so the reformers essentially are going to try to make a move to fill that spot. And you see this in our political system today, where politicians try and make moves so that somebody else can't get that spot. You see it all the time. And so they're trying to make a move, and what they're trying to do is they're trying to get Lady Jane Grey to be the new queen. And they just put her in there. Oh, we're going to make Lady Jane Grey the new queen. Here's the problem with that. Well, what's the problem with that?
She's not an heir to the throne.
Is there an heir to the throne after Edward?
No.
Well,
Is
there's
it?
no practice that says a woman can be queen.
They already had a queen.
Yeah, but I mean, it can't be king, queen, it can't be the top. In England, it had to be a male heir, it couldn't be a female heir.
Well, they already had a female heir
Oh, they did?
in their history.
Okay.
Henry VIII needed a male because their female queen did not go very well. And England was not in a place where it was going to accept that. So if you can't get or if Edward dies, who is the heir to the throne?
Sister?
Mary. Edward's oldest daughter becomes the heir to the throne. Henry's. Who did I say? Edward. I hope he didn't have many kids. So this obviously fails because there is actually an heir to the throne, and the heir to the throne goes back to Catherine of Aragon, because Catherine of Aragon is Henry's first wife. And Henry's first wife had a daughter, and her daughter's name was Mary. And so Mary becomes queen, or is up for queen heir. She is the next in line, so she's going to be queen. We're familiar with Mary. We know Mary's nickname, Bloody Mary, and we know that nickname exists for a reason, right? You don't get that nickname just for funsies, right? So her nickname's Bloody Mary. She is Catholic through and through. And she does not like the reformers, and she particularly does not like Thomas Cranmer. Why would she not like Thomas Cranmer?
He was the,
He's the one that helped her father divorce her mother. He is the reason that her life completely unraveled. And so she is no fan of the reformers. She was raised a staunch Roman Catholic. And so when Mary comes in, she is looking to undo all of what the reformers did. And this is where you see England going back and forth. So that they were doing these Roman practices. Now they're doing the reforming practices. Now they're going to go back to the Roman practices. So, what's that?
Wallpaper.
Exactly. So she is going to basically undo everything, or she's going to try to undo everything that Thomas Cranmer did. So she's going to remove Thomas Cranmer from his position, of course. She's going to remove the Bibles from the churches. She's going to separate clergy from their wives. By the way, the Roman Catholic Church no longer can do this. So there is a loophole, and that is if you went to an Episcopal seminary, and then somehow after seminary you decided, I'm in the wrong place, and you were already married and you already had kids, you could become a Roman Catholic priest, and they cannot tell you that you have to get divorced. And so there are Roman Catholic priests out there that are married with kids. They're always kind of viewed as like second rate though. Like not really putting in all the work that we are. And I think we could all understand why. that they're not thinking that you're not walking the whole walk that we're doing here. Yeah, yes. So she's undoing it. But there are certain things that she can't undo. There are certain things that took place during those 6 years that you cannot undo. What are they? Any ideas?
Can't build the monastery.
Can't rebuild the monasteries, right? Those are gone. So the monasteries are gone. You can't bring them back. What else can she not undo?
Taking away the Bibles?
She did take away the Bibles, but there is something with the Bibles that she can't undo.
English?
That they were in English.
That they were in English and they were read. You can't undo the fact that the people did read the Bible. And so now you've got all sorts of questions that you never had before, because people sat down and they actually read this thing. So you can't undo that. You can't undo that they already heard sermons, real sermons, Reformation sermons. You can't undo that. You can't undo that the doubts about some of the church traditions that were put into the people. The people, in some sense, their eyes are a little more open than they were before. So trying to go all the way back to where they were is going to be really, really hard. Because now the people know what the text says. Now they've heard the sermons. They've questioned just in general the church. So you can't undo all that. So They're open to returning to Rome, to the Roman Church, but it's never going to be able to be like it was. But she's going to try. So, you know what's ironic is that Mary is going to face the same problems that Henry VIII had. And what was Henry VIII's major problem?
He couldn't remarry.
Well,
That wasn't his problem.
Male heir.
yeah, he wanted to remarry so that he could get a male heir. So basically, both of those things. His problem was he needed an heir. Mary's problem is she also needs an heir to the throne. She needs somebody who's going to come after her to take the throne. Now, for Mary, it doesn't have to be a male, but she doesn't have any heir. So she is going to be faced with that problem. She is going to end up making a very poor decision, and she's going to choose Philip II of Spain. And Philip II of Spain just reminds the English people of the Spanish Inquisition, and it doesn't go well. They never take to Philip II of Spain. They do not like it, and so it's just a bad decision. And so if England's looking for like a peaceful kind of move back into Rome, that's not really going to happen. But Mary's going to force it. And so Mary is going to give the reformers three options. Anybody who is pushing for reform or pushing for the Protestant way, you've got three options, you pick. So the first option is you can recant what you were previously about. You can say, I was wrong, that was stupid, I got swept up into things, I don't know what I was thinking, I recant all of my reforming ways. That's an option. The other option is you can run, like as fast as you can. Run very, very quickly and go as far away as you possibly can. And the third option is if you don't run and you don't recant, then you can die. Those are your three options. So Thomas Cranmer is unfortunately going to take the recant route. I'll go into more detail about that. The Peter Martyr and Martin Bucer, they're not from England. They have no attachment to England except it was in Reformation and they were excited to be a part of it. They're out of there. They're gone. Like, see you later. Good luck. I can't remember. It's earlier on in the slides, so I'd have to go back earlier on in the slides. But it's like, I think one's from Zurich and one's from Geneva. I think that's where they are. But you could easily look it up. Or if I have time at the end, I'll just shoot back and see. But they're out of there. The rest of the reformers are basically going to die.
The ones that flee, do they have to sneak out, or were they just, hey, good riddance, get on?
Yeah, you're free to go.
Okay.
Just get out of here. Under Mary, you have 300 reformers burned at the stake, and countless die in prisons throughout England. So there's a reason for her name, Bloody Mary. Henry VIII liked cutting people's heads off. Mary liked burning people. Everybody's got their way that they like to deal with their enemies. So we'll have much more burning going on here. So the first to go is going to be John Hooper. And the reason John Hooper is the first to go is because he is the one with the most extreme reform tendencies. He is the one that pushes the envelope the furthest. So she's going to get rid of John Hooper. And he will be the first to be burned at the stake. And what you're going to have in John Hooper is you're going to have your first bishop burned at the stake in England. It basically puts everybody on notice that Mary's not messing around. Like when she burns a bishop, she is communicating to the rest of England, I mean this. Like this is really going to happen. And John Hooper was beloved, well-known, not like a little bishop in a little dinky town. So John Hooper will be the first to go. The next up are going to be your Oxford martyrs. On Reformation Sunday, we have a collect to the Oxford martyrs. That is Hugh Latimer and Nicholas Ridley, and they get burned at the stake together. And it's in 1555. They're burned at the stake. Hugh Latimer goes up super quick, and Nicholas Ridley not so much. And you know, when you're burned at the stake, you want it to be as fast as possible. You want the flame to be robust. And for whatever reason, the flame struggled on Nicholas Ridley's side, according to history, and it was a slow, agonizing death for Nicholas Ridley. But before I get into this, there's history and then there's legend. And what I'll be sharing with you from here on out about the death of these individuals is some history, but I think some legend attached to it as well. Is there fact in the legend? Perhaps. I don't know. But this is what's recorded for us, and this is all that we have to go on. But it may very well be legend. It's super cool though. Latimer's parting words to Nicholas Ridley were, "Be of good comfort, Master Ridley, and play the man. We shall this day light such a candle by God's grace in England that I trust it shall never be put out." It's a really cool thing to say before you're about to get lit up. And they did. We're still talking about them. We're still talking about them today. Their influence is still present in England. And so Nicholas Ridley and Hugh Latimer are gone, but Thomas Cranmer still remains. And Mary's going to do something pretty interesting with Thomas Cranmer, is that he had to watch this, all these unfold. He had to watch Nicholas Ridley and Hugh Latimer burned. He had to watch John Hooper burned. Physically watch, not just hear about it, but physically watch it. Because they kept, I think I have a picture. They kept him in one of these buildings. I could not determine when I grabbed the picture. But the picture is of the place, of the prison. But I don't know exactly what the prison is and what is not the prison, and where Thomas Cranmer was, but they kept him there, and apparently he had to physically watch these others get burned at the stake. So if you're the first to go, I would imagine that's got to be a little bit easier than being the last to go. And Thomas Cranmer watching all of his friends burn at the stake, first of all, you know it's going to happen. Second of all, you witness the terribleness of it. And so Thomas Cranmer is actually going to recant. And he's going to put it in writing that he recants all of his reforming tendencies. As a way to save himself. So what happens after that? So after that, Mary has this massive victory. The leader of the Protestant movement in England recants. And it's huge. It's a great victory for her. But Mary's going to make a mistake. And the mistake is that she decides to burn Thomas Cranmer anyways. And it's not a popular decision among the people. Because if you give somebody an option, then generally the people expect that you're gonna honor that. And if Thomas Cranmer takes the easy way out, you're gonna honor that. But she doesn't. She's gonna burn him at the stake anyways. However, when brought before the council, Cranmer refuses to read his recantation. Instead, he refers to himself as a Protestant, although a cowardly one. And then when they bring him out to burn him at the stake, Thomas Cranmer takes his hand and he places it in the fire. And I don't want to mess up exactly what he says, but on 1556, basically 5 months after Nicholas Ridley and Hugh Latimer, he takes his hand, he places it in the fire, and he said, for as much as my hand offended in writing contrary to my heart, my hand shall be punished first. And essentially what he's saying is, I should not have recanted, and I used my hand to do that, so my hand will be the first to get lit up. Again, do we know that this is 100% true? No. Some of this is probably legend, but again, it's super cool legend, so I share it with you. This is cool though. If you go to England, this is supposedly the place where Nicholas Ridley, Hugh Latimer, and Thomas Cranmer were burned at the stake. And you can go visit it. It's in the road. It's a cement cross in the middle of the road. And you can go check it out, which is actually kind of cool. It's the only reason I've ever wanted to go to England. I have no desire to go to England. I have other places that I would like to go, but I would love to see this. So after Thomas Cranmer is burned in relatively silence, basically he's the first archbishop to be burned at the stake. So you went from priests to bishops to the Archbishop of Canterbury. Something's going to take place with Mary. Again, Mary wants to, she needs an heir. And she could have swore she was pregnant. I mean, she really could have. But as it turns out, she wasn't pregnant. She had stomach cancer. And she was very excited about, welcoming the heir into the world. And what she actually got to welcome was the death of stomach cancer. And Mary is going to die without an heir to the throne. So if she doesn't have an heir to the throne, who is the next up?
Anne Boleyn's child.
Anne Boleyn's child, Elizabeth. So now Elizabeth is next up. And this I absolutely love. Anybody know what Psalm 118 verse 23 is? This is what Elizabeth said when she heard the news of Mary's death. She said, "This is the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes." She greeted the death of Mary with Psalm 118, verse 23. So now there's a new queen in England. Her name is Elizabeth, and she is the daughter of Anne Boleyn, and she is no Roman Catholic. She is Protestant all the way. Wallpaper again.
She escaped Mary.
I don't really know. I don't.
They didn't have any compunction about killing their rival, especially a Protestant.
No.
She didn't leave the country or anything?
That's a really good question that I've never thought about. So I'm going to look that up just for my own interest, but I'll look that up to get that to you too as well. Because that's a really good question. Something to ponder. Elizabeth is going to usher in a new act of supremacy. Remember the act of supremacy gave Henry VIII as the authority in the Church of England, something the monarch of England still has today. Elizabeth is going to bring the new act of supremacy that now Elizabeth, like Henry, is in charge of the church, the supreme authority and the head. She's going to get a new Book of Common Prayer. Thomas Cranmer's last Book of Common Prayer was 1552. So her Book of Common Prayer is going to be 1559. She's going to make minor adjustments. And the adjustments are basically when Thomas Cranmer wrote the Book of Common Prayer, and I've got to end real soon, but when Thomas Cranmer wrote the Book of Common Prayer, he is the Archbishop of Canterbury. His concern is theology and the church. But when Elizabeth is doing the Book of Common Prayer, she is going to make sure that it's guided through some sort of political lens. And the political lens is this. In England, because we've gone back and forth, I am now Queen of England that has a lot of Roman Catholic supporters and a lot of Reformation supporters. So I need a Book of Common Prayer that can meet the needs of both of them. Does that make sense? So the reason that she makes adjustments is she tones down some of Thomas Cranmer's language, like the Pope is an anathema, or all the horrible things that Thomas Cranmer actually put in the prayer book about the Roman Church. She tones it down. Now, it's still, when you go through the 39 articles, they're not nice to the Roman Church. But she toned it down quite a bit. She also moved the original 42 articles of faith down to 39 because some of them were pretty aggressive. But what she's doing is trying to unify a nation, bring both sides together. And she is actually quite masterful at it. And so she is going to bring both sides together and try to have some sort of unity. So I'm not really going to spend a lot of time on that because I've got very few. So I'm going to end on this. What takes place when she does this is that the really strong, hardcore reformers, they get angry at her because they want Thomas Cranmer. They want full reformation and she doesn't give it to them. So they get frustrated and they leave. And the last question I have for you is, who are they? They're the Puritans. They're the ones that are like, if you're not going to give us Thomas Cranmer full reformation, we're out of here. We're done with this. We're sick of it. We don't want anything to do with the Roman Church. And so that is your English Reformation, and that would bring you up to the history of the Episcopal Church. I think that's all I got for you. Bishop Justin will be here next week. Super fun. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. I have to keep switching this out.